Hello everyone. So today we'll be working on a probability calculator. We will do this by creating a bag class which contains a certain number of balls. And then we'll try to estimate the probability of drawing out a certain type of ball. So normally to calculate such probability, we use statistical formulas. But if we repeat the experiment a large number of times, we can get a pretty good estimate of the probability. So we start by importing copy and random. Then we create our bag class. And here we'll have the init method. And so the number of balls is initially unknown, so we'll pass quarks, that is keyword arguments. You can name it anything you want, but generally following the convention we name it quarks. And now we'll actually store the type of balls in a list. The quarks will actually store it in a dictionary, but we will store in a list. So storing in a list makes it easier to draw a ball at random. So we'll just name it contents. And now using a loop for I in quarks.keys. And another loop for j in range 0, quarks of I. Will just append it to the contents. So actually what happens is the quarks, it stores the data in the form of a dictionary. So suppose if we pass 10 red balls, so the key in the dictionary would be red and the value will be 10. So we will store the word red 10 times in our list. So as I explained before, storing it in a list makes it easier to remove an element at random. Now for drawing a ball out of the bag, we'll define the draw method. So we pass to it say n. So the n represents the number of balls to be drawn. So we'll just make a different copy of C so that the original one doesn't get affected. And we'll create a temporary variable to hold the ball which has been chosen at random. And we'll return everything in the form of list. So now if actually n is greater than the contents of the bag, like if we are trying to draw more balls than what is there in the bag, we just return all the balls which are there in the bag currently. And if n is fine, there's no problem. So then we'll just go forward. So for I in range 0, n, we'll just in our temp we'll store the random ball using random.choice. And then we'll remove this from the list. And we'll add this to return. And finally we'll just return the return array, I mean the RET for visual reference. Actually we can pass it sorted, so it's easier. I'll just explain in a bit. So now to calculate the probability, we'll create another function outside the class. We'll call it calc. And the arguments would be the bag object expected balls. So this will be in the form of a dictionary. Number of balls to be drawn and the number of times the experiment should be performed. Now we create a list exp. So this represents the expected output, and a op. This is the actual output, and cnt variable for counting the number of cases. Now we go in a for loop. For I in expected balls dot keys, and then for j in range 0 comma expected balls of I. So we are just doing the same thing which we did over here. And now exp.append stri. We are just making str just to be sure. So now we create another for loop outside these two loops. For I in range 0 comma num. So this is the magic part. And here op equals back.draw. And the number of balls to be drawn. Oh, I'm so sorry. This would be the number of times experiment should be performed. I'm so sorry. This should be num. So now we have to verify whether the output and the expected output match or not. So for that we'll create another. Right now we'll just write it is match. And two arguments. The expected output and the OP. Or we will just pass a dictionary, that would be easier. And OP. And if this method returns true, we'll increment CNT by 1. And we'll just return CNT by number of times experiment was performed. So we'll create our isMatch function here. And expected balls and OP were the inputs, you can say. Now we'll just use a loop for I in expected balls dot keys. Now I'll just show you what I will do. If op dot count of I is less than expected balls of I, then we'll return false. Else we'll just return true. So what's happening here is we are iterating through the expected balls, and in the output we check the number of those type of balls in the output. Is it less than expected or more than expected? If it is less than expected, we return false because the condition isn't satisfied. Else if the condition is satisfied, we'll just return a true. So sorry guys, looks like there's just a couple of typing mistakes here. So this is self and this is ret. So now let's execute our code. We'll be using the shell this time. So import probability calc as PC and make sure you are in the same directory where you have typed the code. And let's create the bag object. Suppose there are 10 red balls, 10 orange balls and 10 blue balls. Now pc.calc the bag object, expected output, suppose 5 red balls and 5 orange balls. And the number of balls to be drawn, suppose we will draw 12 balls and will perform the experiment 5000 times. The more the better. So that's the probability, estimate of the probability, you can say better. So if we pass more number of balls, suppose 20 balls, then the probability gets closer to 1. Suppose just take a direct one, suppose 30. In this case you get 1. So it's just an estimation of the probability, not the accurate probability. But still, if you perform the experiment even more number of times, you might get very close to the correct answer. So that's it for this video. Please share it with your friends. Like, share and subscribe.